Chapter 29. Hope. Navarra's eyes peered over a snowbank and squinted through the light flurry that was dusting the mountainside.
"I still don't see anything," she whispered.
Another pair of eyes peered over the snowbank beside her.
"He is a wily one," Strahd whispered back.
"Whatever magic he has left he uses to conceal himself. But every now and then he comes out. Look, there, beyond those trees."
"I think I see an elk,"
Navarra said. "That's him."
"Really?"
Navarra poked her head up like a ground squirrel. Strahd gently pulled her back down. They both crouched behind the snowbank.
"I wish we could get a closer look," Navarra said.
They had been on Mount Baratok most of the day searching for this wizard. "That might be dangerous."
"Dangerous?"
Navarra smiled at him. Suddenly there was a loud booming noise, and the ground shook. Navarra peeked around the corner to see a boulder the size of a wagon flying toward her head. Just in time, Strahd stepped in front of her and cast a shield spell. The boulder shattered against Strahd's magic, sending splinters of rock rebounding and hissing through the air like sling bullets. Now Navarra could see the source of the boulder. Where the elk had been, there stood a human figure holding a wand. The figure shouted,
"Stay back, you devil! Stay back! I know who you work for. The darkness follows you. I see it."
"What's he talking about?"
Navarra asked. Strahd dropped the shield spell and rubbed his temples. "I have no idea. He's mad."
"Stay back, or I'll smite you,"
said the mad wizard. A blast of cold wind blew from his wand. Navarra and Strahd dove behind the snowbank as an icy vortex tore through the air above their heads.
"That voice,"
Navarra thought. It sounded familiar. She wanted to get closer.
"If only I could turn invisible, I could sneak up on him."
"I do not understand why you are so fascinated with this old bedlamite," Strahd said. Nevertheless, he moved his hands over Navarra in the familiar pattern of an invisibility spell. Navarra disappeared.
"Thank you,"
she said in a serious tone, then gave a big smile, hoping he could not see it. "Be careful, Navarra," Strahd said. "You are only mortal."
"You're not coming?"
"He would only run away. If you want to see him, you will have to go on your own." Navarra circled quietly around the wizard's flank, staying as far as possible from his wild blasting, while she picked her way over the rocks and crevices of the mountainside. She took care not to disturb anything that might give away her position, but did not bother about being quiet. The thunder and lightning that the mad mage was hurling at Strahd drowned out all other noises. Navarra was about 50 feet away when the mage turned his head and waved his wand in her direction. The invisibility dropped. "Drat!" Navarra thought. She looked to see if Strahd might come to her aid, but a line of trees blocked her view.
"Who are you, you friend of fiends?"
the wizard said, approaching with his wand leveled at her chest.
This was a stupid idea, she thought.
What could she do? She backed up and said the first thing that came to mind.
"Hello, I'm Navarra."
The wizard stopped and lowered his wand.
"Navarra? I think I know you."
His voice. She recognized his voice. The wizard was close enough that she could see him clearly now. Hidden behind his gray beard and wrinkles was a face she knew well. But how could it be? He reached into a pocket and pulled out a silver comb with ivory prongs.
"You gave me this," he said.
"Victor?" Navarra murmured, shocked beyond imagination. He shook his head.
"I'm not that jackass anymore. I go by Mordenkainen these days."
Before the old man could say anything more, Navarra threw her arms around him.
"Oh, Victor, I'm so glad to see you. But what? How? You're old. And you can't possibly be the Mordenkainen, can you?
I think my name is a bit of a paradox. I liked the name on that spell book I found when I was younger, so when I left Barovia, I used it as me own.
You were the headmaster at the Houses of Merlin?
That's me.
But how did you escape Barovia?
I never could get that teleportation spell to work, but I found the secret to getting out.
He lowered his voice.
Time travel. I found a chronomancy staff in the dungeons of Ravenloft, used it to travel back in time to before the curse. I lived a great life on the outside world, but I knew Barovia still needed saving, so I came back. And I failed. My staff, broken. It was the only way to get out.
Oh, Victor, but how have you been living here in the mountains ever since?
I have my ways,
he said, pulling out a spoon. His eye twitched. Navarra tilted her head, wondering how mad he was.
It'll be okay, she said, patting his shoulder. We'll put things right. Me, Henry, Rowan, Irina. We're going to break the curse.
No, you won't.
Victor's bushy eyebrows turned up in dismay.
I've been to the future. I've seen it with my own eyes. You and your friends try to save the valley, but you fail.
Navarra's forehead creased.
That can't be. Are you sure you know what you saw? They do say you're a bit addled.
Well, I have been living off tree bark and mushrooms lately. Does your skin usually change from purple to green?
Navarra shook her head.
I didn't think so.
Navarra, are you all right? Strahd's voice spoke in her mind.
Yes,
she replied quickly.
I'm coming back. Victor, I have to go, but I'll be back for you. The others and I, we will get you out of Barovia again.
You won't, but it's a nice sentiment.
He patted her arm.
If you see my younger self, give him a smack on the head for me. Oh, and thank you for the tip.
He moved his hands in a pattern she knew well, and then shot a blast of green eldritch magic, hitting a nearby tree.
I used to show your technique to me students at the houses.
Navarra squinted her eyes at him, wondering how a wizard could cast a warlock spell. Navarra, Strahd asked in her mind.
I'm all right,
she told him, then hugged Victor.
I'm sorry you've gone a bit loony, but it's nice to meet you, Mordenkainen.
Navarra found Strahd with Bucephalus. The nightmare was standing on a rocky outcrop. Did you satisfy your curiosity? Strahd asked.
I did,
Navarra said, warming her hands on Bucephalus's withers.
You were right. He is utterly mad.
I told you as much. Now, I think it's time we leave. Navarra was glad she had been able to keep Strahd occupied for the better part of the day. Though he seemed to be enjoying himself, at least her friends were safe for now. They flew back to the castle, and Strahd told Navarra he had a special dinner prepared for her.
May I have 2 hours to get ready?
She asked, when they had landed in the courtyard. The wool dress she wore was damp and cold, but she wanted to do more than change her clothes. For the first time, she wanted to explore Castle Ravenloft. Strahd agreed, and Navarra rushed off to the attic above her quarters. When she entered through a creaking door, she was greeted by a hodgepodge of strange objects and smells. Tables covered with bottles, jars, and decanters lined the room on every side, and in the many containers were every kind of magical ingredient, glowing liquids, colorful powders, pickled things Navarra didn't care to identify. She wondered what kinds of potions were being brewed here. She started reading some of the bottle labels, when 2 old women came and scolded her, saying she had no business in their workshop. Judging by their shriveled faces and the black cauldron bubbling with green liquid in the corner of the room, Navarra suspected the women were hags, though they claimed to be witches, whatever that meant. When Navarra asked if they were working on her gown, they sneered and told her that an elf as ugly as her did not deserve such a pretty dress. Navarra huffed and left the attic. But when she returned to her own bedroom to change, she found the very dress she had requested lying finished on her bed. It looked exactly like her drawing. It was blue and green, with a hint of gold. Instead of wearing it, she stashed it away and slipped on another dress from her closet, a red gown with long velvet sleeves. She still had time before Strahd was expecting her, and used it to explore the high tower, the tallest turret in the castle, the one she had never been inside before. At first she wondered if the high tower might not be entirely sealed off, because it did not open onto any other floors in the south wing. At last, however, she discovered an entrance by going through a chapel on the ground floor. She was surprised to find a chapel in Ravenloft, especially one so grand, with so many tall stained-glass windows. But years of grime blurred the once colourful scenes in the panes, and decaying wooden benches were evidence that the chapel had long been abandoned. Haute reliefs of angels covered by cobwebs attested to the room's forgotten beauty. Navarra climbed the spiral stairs of the high tower. Unlike the north tower, this one was narrower and did not have an open shaft at its center. The stairs rose ever upward, ascending hundreds of feet without any sign of ending. Just when Navarra wondered if she would ever reach the top, she found herself in a circular room with a stone floor. Windows lined the walls, and aging beams supported a steep, cone-shaped roof. She went to a window and looked out onto a breathtaking view of the mountains in the distance. Then something moved above her head. She looked up. Lurking in the rafters was a puppet-like doll with a metal face and a wicked grin. Navarra did her best to be friendly with it, thinking it might be a golem, but that did not stop the thing from hopping down from its perch and trying to push her down the stairs. It even tried to assault her with a pair of scissors.
"You nasty thing,"
Navarra said to the creature, and grabbed it.
"Strahd?"
she asked him telepathically. "Yes, Navarra," Strahd answered.
"I found this horrid creature, it looks like a toy puppet, in the tower, and it tried to kill me. May I get rid of it?"
"What?"
"I'll take that as a yes."
Navarra tossed the doll out a window and watched as it smashed to pieces in the courtyard below. She wiped her hands together smugly. One less foul thing in Barovia. She left the tower and wandered to the battlements of the keep. It was a chilly day, and Navarra wrapped her arms around herself as she walked the perimeter. She was just rounding a corner when she saw Escher. He opened a window from the battlement to the interior, and climbed through. Curious, Navarra followed the vampire, crawling through the window and entering a dusty dining room. In the middle of the room was a long oak table, lined with chairs and place settings for a feast. In the middle of the table, leaning to one side, was a tiered wedding cake, green with mold. Navarra scrunched her nose at the rank smell. "Interesting place, isn't it?" Escher said. He was hiding in the corner of the room near the window, holding a lute in his hands. Navarra jumped. "Don't worry. I won't tell if you won't tell."
"Are we not allowed in here?"
she asked, recalling that Strahd had only forbidden her from going to the dungeons. "I've never asked," Escher said. "But the last time a spawn touched that cake, she ended up dead by the master's hand. This room is where Sergei and Tatiana were supposed to have their banquet on their wedding day."
"So why are you here?"
"I like the instruments." He set down the lute on a chair near the wall. Then he pointed a finger. "That harp over there will summon a ghost if you play it." Navarra walked over to the enormous gilded harp. It stood taller than she did.
"Whose ghost?"
she asked. There was no response. Escher had left the room. Navarra went through a door to her left, into a bathing chamber. Red satin curtains hung in 2 archways on either side of the chamber, while a white marble tub with soaps and towels sat between them. Navarra passed through one of the curtains. Here she found a closet filled with cloaks and formal wear. She ran her hand over the fine clothes, each one giving off the alluring aroma of Strahd's cologne. She walked out under the archway at the far end of the closet, back into the bathing chamber, when suddenly a humanoid creature drenched in blood emerged from the tub. It leaped onto the ceiling, and Navarra screamed. She ran out through a pair of double doors across from the tub, slamming the doors behind her. Her heart was pounding, but the bloody creature did not follow. She looked around the new room in which she found herself. It was dimly lit, and there was a canopied bed on the opposite wall. A large Z was carved on the headboard. Someone moved under the red sheets, and a dainty foot slipped out. Navarra tiptoed to another set of double doors, hoping they were an exit.
"What are you doing here?"
the person in the bed asked. It was Gertruda. She wore a purple nightgown, and now she was sitting up, glaring at Navarra with hostile red eyes.
"Nothing,"
Navarra said casually.
"Just leaving."
She turned to look back at the door to the bathing chamber.
"Say, you wouldn't know what that monster in the tub was, would you?" "What are you talking about?"
Gertruda said, annoyed.
"You know what? Never mind. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to get one thing straight. I share Strahd's bed. Me."
Navarra's face went sour, and she chuckled.
Okay. "Get out of here, you bitch!"
Gertruda threw a slipper as Navarra ran out the doors. Navarra's stomach churned. She sat at a small round table on the terrace near the courtyard. The grey valley spread out before her, and the wind had calmed to an eerie stillness. The cold lingered, though, and Navarra shivered, glad she had picked a gown that covered most of her skin. She looked down and grimaced at the food on her plate. It was fricadella, with red cabbage and potatoes, one of her favorite meals, cooked to perfection by the smell of it. Strahd sat beside her. As usual, he had no food or drink. "I trust you had a good day, Navarra," he said. She shifted in her seat. She was trying to decide which was more disturbing, the bloody creature leaping out of the tub, or Gertruda in Strahd's bed.
"What was that thing in your tub?" she finally asked.
"Exploring my personal chambers?" he said with a raised eyebrow. Navarra looked down at her plate.
"I just stumbled upon it. But what was that thing?"
"It is nothing, only a manifestation of a demented spirit. Do not worry yourself about it." At that moment a tawny owl landed on the armrest of Strahd's chair. "Ah, Sergei." He petted the owl and noticed Navarra's confused expression. "My familiar is similar to your own little dragon. If he dies in this world, I can bring him back." Navarra cocked her head.
"And his name is Sergei?"
Strahd gave the owl a bit of meat from the platter on the table. "It is." Navarra picked up her fork and forced a bite. "Look over there, Navarra," Strahd said, pointing to the precipice that stretched out from the terrace. "That is where Tatiana fell." Navarra swallowed.
"What did you like so much about Tatiana?"
"Everything." Strahd leaned back in his chair. "She was and is flawless. Perfect in every way. Beauty, sophistication, intelligence. I've never seen a woman with such dignity and natural grace, nor one with such wit and sweetness." He went on to describe a goddess, almost exactly as he had described her in his diary, overflowing with praise. He ended with, She is the perfect woman. Navarra set down her fork.
I know Irina, and she's more wonderful than what you could imagine. Not because she's flawless or perfect, but because she's real. The woman you've just described is nothing more than a fiction.
The muscles in Strahd's jaw tightened. Take care what you say, Navarra.
No, I'm not some sycophant like the rest of your spawn, only giving you honeyed words. If you don't value my honesty, then you should just turn me now.
Navarra crossed her arms defiantly, but felt suddenly sick inside. She had done it this time. Why couldn't she just play along? When he spoke, however, Strahd's voice was not harsh. Tell me then, he said in a sorrowful tone, is hope worth it? Navarra, too afraid to look him in the eyes before, looked up at him now.
I suppose it depends on what you're putting your hope in.
I have been waiting lifetime after lifetime for Tatiana to return my love, but every time I get close, she dies again, without understanding the sacrifice I made for her. I fear that hope is only a phantom sent to mock me. So tell me, is love worth it? Navarra chose her words carefully.
True love is always worth it. But I think Irina has already found that love.
Strahd's hands tightened into fists. She may think she has found something, but no one could ever love her the way I do. Once Henry is out of the way, she will see. Maybe I should have Rahadin impale him on a stake, or I could send a ghost to possess him and throw him off a cliff. Maybe I give him a coffin filled with bats, so when he opens it, they would fly in his face.
Yes, do that one. Bats in a coffin. Classic. Great idea.
Strahd grinned.
Just please,
Navarra urged.
Don't hurt Henry. He's like a brother to me.
Strahd narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Yes, he is like a brother to me too. Navarra drew a breath.
I've heard that an unfulfilled hope makes the heart sick. I can see why. What hopes did you have before Tatiana? You said you wanted to learn, and you have.
Despite my father, Strahd said. It would be too cruel for me to even tell you about the things he made me do. But yes, I did have other aspirations when I was younger. I wanted to be like my mother. She was a religious person. Many religious people are hypocrites, but not my mother. She was good. I had my hopes set on becoming a priest because of her.
A priest? Navarra smiled. You? I can't believe it.
It is true. I was to be an acolyte of the Morning Lord.
Really?
Really. His expression softened. I have not mentioned that to anyone in a long time. In the end, it was my brother who became the acolyte. Sergei stole everything from me, including our mother's love.
I'm sure she cared about you.
All her affections changed once Sergei was born. I could never do anything right, whilst Sergei was perfect.
No one is perfect. If you became a soldier, maybe your mother was worried you were becoming too much like your father.
Strahd grew quiet and stared off into the distance. His eyes were still brown. He had not changed them since the falls. I have been trapped and unhappy since as long as I can remember, even before the curse. What hope is there, Navarra? Navarra reached out and touched the vampire's cold hand.
The kind that leads to redemption, if one is willing to change.
That night, Navarra tossed and turned in her bed, unable to sleep. She had already talked with Gostomir and told him what she had found in the castle, including the purpose of the crystal heart. but she had omitted many of the details of her activities at Ravenloft. And the Fae had not pried further. Rather, Gostamir had focused on telling her about how he was in contact with Henry and the others.
"If you do see them,"
Navarra said, with a glimmer of hope,
"you need to be as Gostamir as possible. For me."
"No worries," the Fae had replied. "When I relay your story to them, I will do it in the form of an interpretive dance." Navarra tried now to think of Gostamir, but the Fae was elusive even in her thoughts. Finally, she threw off her sheets and put on the slippers at the foot of her bed. If Rowan were here, she would have searched the whole castle by now. Navarra crept down the staircase that led from the lounge, descending 3 levels until she stepped out onto the main floor. She looked around in various rooms and halls, finding nothing noteworthy, until she found herself once again in the abandoned chapel. A cry came from the high tower's staircase. It came from below, not from above. The cry was like broken sobbing, echoing up the stairs from the dungeons. As Navarra approached the top of the stairs, statues of helmed figures on rearing mounts menaced her from alcoves on either side of the landing. The sobs grew louder, then faded, then grew again. It was a heart-wrenching sound that brought a tear to Navarra's eye. "The master will not be pleased," Rahadin said. The chamberlain was a dark silhouette standing by the statue to her right.
"I'm not doing anything wrong,"
Navarra said, stepping back.
"I wasn't going down there."
Rahadin emerged from the shadows and loomed over her. "People like you are always a distraction to him. You entertain him with your soft words and warm embraces, but you care nothing about his fate. Soon you will fade just like the rest, and he will remain, tormented still." Navarra looked down the stairs.
"What is Strahd doing to that man down there?"
"What you hear is only the master himself in the catacombs. And, as I said, he won't be pleased. Do you think he would want you to hear him weeping? Why do you look so surprised? He frequently mourns over the tomb of his brother. He deals with his sorrows in his own ways, but distractions like you only make things worse." Navarra turned to leave.
"I've never told this to anyone, not even to myself until now. I do care what happens to him."
The next day, after Navarra slept in, Strahd took her to see the Vistani by carriage. They went to the Serpool, and were greeted by Madame Eva, who bowed when she saw Strahd. The Lord of Barovia left Navarra at the camp, while he went off into the woods, accompanied by 2 Vistani. Navarra talked with Madame Eva for a while, keeping the conversation light at first. But when they were alone, she asked the Vistana,
"Did you foresee this?"
Madame Eva, who had been making tea over a campfire, carefully lifted the iron kettle with a cloth.
"The cards never lie,"
she said, then handed Navarra a clay teacup.
"Right. I mean, about me being here with you and—"
She looked off into the woods where Strahd had gone. Madame Eva poured hot tea into Navarra's cup.
"I saw hope,"
she said, giving the elf a knowing look. Navarra wondered what that might mean. Just then, Arabelle came up to them. The little girl's eyes were pink and puffy, as though she had been crying, but she put on a smile when she saw Navarra. Navarra tried to cheer her up by asking about her favorite toys in Blinsky's shop. She was about to ask about her father Luvash, when Madame Eva gave her a stern shake of the head, warning her not to. Why had Strahd brought Navarra here? She did miss being around other people, and was surprised at how much her spirits had been bolstered by coming back to this camp. Was this Strahd's attempt to show her kindness, or had he merely brought her along as a showpiece while he conducted business? When Strahd returned, Navarra bade Arabelle and Madame Eva farewell. Before she climbed into the black carriage, she asked,
"Arabelle, could you read my fortune one more time?"
Arabelle's eyes lit up when she took Navarra's hand.
"It's good news this time," the little girl said, tracing her palm. "You found true love."
Navarra's bolstered spirits crumpled as Strahd, who had been standing beside her, put his hand on her shoulder and smiled. On the way back to the castle, Navarra was determined to act as carefree as Gostamir always did, and she ended up showing Strahd her patron's clapping game. When their clapping produced a butterfly, Strahd praised her ability to do magic even without a spellcasting focus. "You are special, Navarra," Strahd said, as the carriage bobbed along. "I once thought that Rowan would have been a good match to succeed me, but I see now that I was wrong about her. She is too much like her father, in all the wrong ways." Navarra frowned at the name of her friend. "I know she still lives," he said, "and you know as well. Did you not?"
"Please leave her alone."
"I would gladly do so, if only she, like yourself, should leave Henry and join with me. But no matter. I have you, and that is enough. Navarra, I would like you to be my warlock." Navarra's eyes bulged. "You could not ask for a greater patron than myself." Rather than acting indignant or upset, Navarra was amused.
"Strahd von Zarovich wants to be my patron?" she asked. "This I have to write down."
Navarra took out a pencil and her journal from a slim satchel she now carried. She flipped to a blank page.
"Today," she said as she wrote, "Strahd von Zarovich asked to be my patron."
She looked up at Strahd, who was sitting beside her.
"I will have to think about it."
"Come, Navarra, what is there to think? I know you have already made a pact with that Fae, but Fae are fickle creatures that cannot be trusted. He is obviously using you for his own ends." Navarra was about to protest, but thought it might be imprudent to tell the vampire about her affections for Gostamir. "Tonight," Strahd said, "come to my bedroom, and I will show you my magic." That evening, Navarra put on the dress she had designed. Its patterns of blue and green cloth were delicately interwoven, and its plunging neckline cut a revealing swath from her shoulders down to her navel. Before leaving her room, Navarra touched the gown with a minor cantrip to make it glimmer, just like Gostamir's clothes always did. When she arrived at Strahd's study and saw the closed doors that led to his bedroom, her heart skipped a beat. She opened the double doors, and this time the bed was neatly made, with no Gertrude to be seen. Across from her, Strahd sat on a couch beneath an arched window. He stood as she entered. "Navarra, you look absolutely stunning." He held out his hand, and Navarra went to him and took it. A low table lit with candlelight, decked with fresh food and wine, sat by the couch. Navarra's whole body involuntarily trembled at the vampire's touch as they sat together on the plush sofa. Strahd flexed his fingers and cast a spell, making his flesh warm under Navarra's hand. "There," he said, putting an arm around her. "I forgot how cold it is in here." Then he picked up a mince tart from the table and gave it to her. "Here, try these." Navarra ate the tart, and a burst of flavors brought her back to the days she had spent with Vasily.
"I've actually missed eating these," she said.
The small bite-sized pies had become a favorite. "They were my favorites growing up," Strahd said.
"Yes, There's something about the combination of rum and fruit, and the texture.
It makes your mouth water, does it not? Though I cannot taste any food's pleasures, I can still smell it. They remind me of home. Navarra took another tart, relaxing as they spoke. She watched Strahd, and though he did not change his appearance, she saw Vasily in him for the first time. From the moment he had revealed himself at the dinner, she had been looking at him the other way round, only seeing the devil in her memories of Vasily and thinking how evil Vasily was. But the truth was, Vasily had seemed so human. The way he talked about hopes and dreams, the way he laughed when Navarra told him a funny story, the way he cared about the beauty in the world, the way he talked of fresh tarts, and how he missed home. Could it be that Vasily was not just an act?
When we went on dates in Vallaki, Navarra said, could you not taste any of the food we ate?
It was a misery. Every bite turned to ash in my mouth. But it was worth it to spend time with you.
What about garlic? She asked.
Garlic gives blood a pungent flavour, but that is all. Navarra wrinkled her nose.
What about entering someone's home uninvited? I've been puzzling over it. The Martikovs were very careful about who they let in the Blue Water Inn. With every guest, they would say, "You are not welcome." Did you charm them to get in, like you did when you entered Irina's house?
A vampire cannot enter the dwelling of an unwilling host, that is true. But I did not charm the Martikovs, and I only charmed my way into the Indirovich house as a bit of a joke. The fact of the matter is, I need no one's permission to go where I please in my own county. Remember, I am the ancient. I am the land. All of Barovia is my dwelling. Bad thoughts arose in Navarra's mind, reminding her of Strahd's wickedness. But she buried them. She buried those thoughts deep within herself, for she could not think ill of Strahd now. She could not afford to be angry at him. She needed to stay focused.
So, she said, what magic did you want to show me?
Anything you want to learn. I could show you how to raise the dead.
Really? You could teach me resurrection?
No, I was referring to the animation of corpses, making ghouls and the like. They would obey your every command.
Interesting. Actually, I would prefer to learn spells like how to fly.
Strahd grinned. He got to his feet and opened the window behind the couch.
I've already been practicing, Navarra said, standing. I even found this.
She pulled out a bird's feather she had found by the windowsill of her room. It was the right material component for the flight spell.
I hope you're not angry.
You have become very resourceful without a focus. Have no fear, Navarra. I trust you would not be foolish enough to fly away. He touched the red jewel on her neck. On the contrary, I am impressed. Navarra closed her eyes and began flapping her arms.
Okay, I'm thinking happy thoughts.
What in hell's name are you doing? Stop! You are embarrassing yourself.
No one can see us.
That is not the point. It is undignified.
But look, I can lift off the ground this way.
No. Strahd took her arms and pinned them back to her sides. You are a warlock, not a sparrow. Let me show you how this is done properly. He guided her to the open window and stood behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders. Think of the air and the sky. As Navarra did so, she felt Strahd's magic flowing through her. I would like to read your mind as I instruct you. Is that all right? Navarra nodded, then felt him entering her thoughts. No, Navarra. Do not think about birds singing. Just think of the boundless sky. No limits. There you go. Good. Position your hand as you would for a wind spell, like this. He gently moved her fingers. Now reach out with the magic and become one with the air. Navarra lifted off the ground, feeling Strahd's hands slip from her shoulders. She plunged out the window, upward into the night sky, and it felt like diving into a cold ocean. Wind rushed through her hair. Excitement prickled her skin. For a brief and glorious moment she felt free. Navarra flew beyond a bank of clouds until she saw the canopy of the heavens opening above her, a full moon and a host of glittering stars. She soared in the moonlight for what must have been miles, but she did not allow the exhilaration to run away with her better judgment. Before too long she dipped beneath the clouds and headed back to Castle Ravenloft. When she landed in the bedroom, Strahd was sitting by the window, beaming.
"That was amazing!"
Navarra threw her arms in the air and did a spin.
"I know we've flown on Bucephalus before, but this was something else. It was—"
She was about to go on more effusively, but remembered whose presence she was in and composed herself.
"I mean, it was very invigorating."
"I am glad," Strahd said. "I have not shared my magic with anyone in quite some time." Navarra sat back on the couch.
"Strahd, could I have a pair of scissors or a knife?"
Strahd raised an eyebrow, but lent her his dagger. She took it and cut a small lock of her own hair, then asked if she could have a lock of his. He leaned in close, letting her take a few strands of his black hair. "Very clever," he said, as she braided the red and black locks together.
"They're only friendship bracelets,"
she said, making one for herself and one for him.
"I don't know how to scry, if that's what you're worried about."
But deep down she had every intention of learning how. "Would you like me to show you?" Navarra tied a braided bracelet to Strahd's wrist and tried to conceal her eagerness when she said yes. After he explained the basic principles of scrying, Strahd brushed his finger on her cheek and smiled. Suddenly, Navarra felt completely at ease, more than before. Why had she been so anxious? In her heart she had been hiding behind a wall, but what did she need to guard against? The adoring way he looked at her was so winsome. She felt her stomach flutter. There he was, handsome, strong, powerful, and the smartest man she had ever met. Whatever his crimes, surely they weren't so bad. He must have his reasons. The only thing that seemed to matter now was that she felt free to like him. Navarra pressed herself against his muscular chest and kissed him. His lips felt even better than Vasili's, and she kissed him harder. Strahd's kisses traveled down her neck, and as quickly as it had come, the peaceful feeling vanished. She had been charmed. A small prick touched the skin at her throat, and Navarra's eyes went wide with terror. She pushed away, slipping out of his arms, breathing hard.
"No!"
she yelled. "Navarra, I only wanted a taste. I promise I will not turn you."
"No! And you charmed me. I don't want to be charmed."
But why had he released her from the charm? He could have enchanted her all the way into bed if he had wanted. "I did charm you for a moment, but only to make you feel more comfortable with me. The charm does not control you." He slid closer again. "I cannot make you desire me." Was it true? When she had been charmed before, back at the graveyard, there was no passion, no longing to be with Strahd, only cordiality. Navarra now hid again behind the wall guarding her heart, but she dreaded to think what might happen if that wall was gone. She realized then that she cared too much. Navarra straightened her shoulders.
"Did you charm me when you were Vasili?"
"Not with magic."
"Then don't do it as Strahd. I can choose to like you on my own."
She touched the new bracelet on her own wrist and sighed.
"Why do you weep for your brother?"
Strahd looked away and did not reply.
"Why did you name your owl after him? You say you hate your father Barov, yet you named this county after him. You scorn your mother Ravenovia, yet you say you loved her, and you named this castle in her memory."
Navarra put a hand on his cheek and turned his face back to hers.
"You say you want love, but all you do is hate. You are a man of contradictions. You are cursed, but I want to help you."
She whispered the last sentence and kissed him, not as passionately as before, but tenderly. She left Strahd later that evening, telling him that she would need more time to think about being his warlock. Of course, she told herself, she would never abandon Gostamir. After settling into bed, she lit her candle, and Gostamir appeared, happy to tell her what he had been up to. But when he saw the look of anguish in her eyes, he asked,
"Navarra, are you all right?"
"I love you, Gostamir,"
she said weakly.
"I love you."
Tears glistened in the Fae's eyes, and he put an incorporeal hand on her head.
"And I love you, Navarra."
They sat there for a while in silence. Then she repeated it back to him once more, but this time added,
"We can break the curse, but maybe we could just leave him alone."
She turned away from her patron, not wanting to see the pain on his face. Instead, she heard it in the tremor of his voice.
"You love him too."